Got it. Do you want me to hold this? Or do you want to hold it?
You didn't want to be seen with an iPad. That's what it was.
Hands off.
Camera's on. Too bad.
Welcome to DTLT today.
Talking about badgers.
Yeah, we're here talking about honey badgers.
The honey badgers are taking over and revolutionizing education.
They
They're
are.
the future.
Yeah.
So anyway, on Twitter, I don't know how many of you do any of these social network things, but if you do, you probably have seen the hashtag or seen people talking about badges. And I guess the Mozilla Foundation with Haystack and the MacArthur Foundation and a whole bunch of other folks are actually experimenting with the idea of what badges mean for kind of open accreditation. Kind of the idea of, you know, giving people kudos for what they're doing. I don't really even know where to start with this. And I'm following it, but I heard a little bit of ennui with these new ideas that are going to revolutionize education and don't get to anything to do with our core societal problems. Like, I find that kind of funny.
I'm sure QR codes
like-
are
It's
involved somehow.
funny in a like, can I...
Funny, haha, am I here to fucking amuse you, funny? Right? Or am I fucking clown? I feel like everybody in my Twitter stream right now is a clown.
I love that how you had nothing to say about this.
I don't. I don't. So anyway, I have nothing to say about this. I will interject as I find my thing, but I'm going to leave it to my betters, not credential-wise, but my betters, Tim Owens and Paul
Look, I've got a badge
because
that
I
proves
have enough
otherwise.
credentials. I don't really need a badge, frankly.
I would just like to go on the record as saying I was a Girl Scout and I quit
Yeah.
because I hated badges.
You hated badges?
Yeah.
I hated the hoops that I had to jump through to get the stupid little badge to put on the sash I had to wear.
Yeah.
And it was like this public display.
Maybe Mozilla will have everyone selling cookies.
I can relate.
Now cookies I can get behind. Cookie
Yeah.
love.
Cookie love. Yeah, but not make them.
But not
you sell
badge
theirs.
Well,
What do you
I'm
think of the
glad
badges?
without having an opinion that you totally brought us into the explicit rating right off the get-go. So that's good.
Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah.
Nicely
I
done.
appreciate that.
Hey,
It was-
I to serve and protect.
Yeah.
What badges, Tim?
All right. So to clarify a little bit about that, and I'll be truthfully honest. Like, I didn't watch the actual announcement, but Mozilla got up there with Arnie Duncan, with the MacArthur Foundation, and basically Mozilla, the foundation, has created this framework for badges. They saw that badges seem to be working pretty well in different areas. Foursquare uses them.
Games use
P2P
them.
University. That what they did is they piloted this framework with when Mozilla came out with their School of Webcraft, which is this online system
Sure.
where you can learn about PHP, JavaScript, all this other stuff, and you could earn badges to do that. And so what they decided was that Mozilla likes to talk about the internal frameworks and ways that you create these things as a larger picture.
Yeah.
So they created this project called the Open Badge Infrastructure, right? So the idea being that any institution, any company, any person could give you a type of badge, and while the framework itself, there's no cost involved to using it. The institution could put a cost behind it. If you were gonna, for example, get a UMW badge that shows that you had learned English well. I guess they're trying to market this in a way as, for, what am I thinking? For the adult learner, for online learning,
Or
for things of that
For
nature.
the independent
And
learner.
alternative forms
An
of
alternative form of
accreditation
credentialing.
and credentialing.
Exactly. So,
Thank goodness, a tool.
which,
Yeah, and used on a micro level, as Noise Professor's saying, badges tied to student learning outcomes. I see that, but like to me, it's like the best parts of learning are like when you have that moment when you realize God doesn't exist.
Right,
When
but
you have that
that's-
existential crisis.
Well, and-
that's like how do you badge that?
Well, and it's like, badges represent this culmination, and the best parts of learning happen in the spaces in between,
And,
right?
and then
not in the culmination.
let's call
in
it-
the processes. And I don't know, just the idea that and literally, like, the white paper in this website is labeled as an in-depth look at how badges can reinvent 21st century learning.
well, I
Like,
mean, this is...
that
But that's the argument. As soon as anybody finds a technology, everybody runs to their blog to say how it's going to revolutionize education. So this is nothing new where somebody has come out with a tool that possibly has a purposeful use, and immediately everybody's running and saying,
Yeah.
this is going to change the nature of education, because everybody's looking for that change.
But as soon as I see those words, I am skeptical.
Right.
Well, the other thing
Yeah, the
that's
nature-
interesting is, like, how does it really change the nature of assessment?
It doesn't.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, it's like,
The representation behind that badge is still the same.
yeah.
You know,
It's still like you did pass or you didn't pass. You get kudos or you don't get kudos. It may look different. It may not be necessarily tied to an institution. But, I mean, I think the idea, and, you know, Noise Professor is suggesting this in the chat, as Martha said, it's like those interstitial spaces, the social spaces in between, that network culture was trying to break open and reevaluate these relationships based on trust and based on some notions of kind of a phase system between people, a social system, a community, to bring it back to the object, to bring it back to the thing, the badge, in some ways is yet another assault on the notion, I think, of what's best about the social.
And if you look, if they're really like looking to other models in deciding, you know, that this is a way forward, you know, look at Foursquare or look at badges as a form of like gaming and gameplay.
Sure.
It's like the badges are not. The badges are not. They're a form of play.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? There's a fun to those.
Right.
That this is not about that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think you're divorcing the badge from the thing that makes badges in those contexts sort
Absolutely.
of fun and silly and unexpected. Like that's one of the things with Foursquare is you get these badges and you're like, who knew there was a badge for that?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like there isn't this. Okay, I'm going to get credentialed as the mayor of, you know, Starbucks. Like,
Well, but I do feel like in some aspect, maybe there could be some use behind me trying to tell you, look, I know PHP. Let's think about it in terms of a job interview. So I'm trying to tell them I know PHP. Well, you can prove it with your online work. Some jobs want to see some sort of certification. So it gets back to this idea of how do you prove your credentials? Do you pay companies to do this certification? And whereas one institution might put value behind a certain, you know, type of credential, another might say, yeah, you know, Phoenix University, that's great and all, but I don't think that that's going to fly here, you know.
Well,
but I don't think.
But how does the badge solve that?
I don't think
Yeah.
it does.
It
and that's
doesn't,
the problem.
and that's the biggest thing. It's like P2P University should be saying, look, create an awesome kind of portfolio of the work you did in PHP or whatever it was and show it off to employers and let them know you did it, rather than using P2P as that middleman again who gives you the badge to brand you. Because let's face it, that reinforces the idea of power within the institution or within a person, because it's not just about institutions, but it actually always already defers power to someone else. And the idea of a badge just reinforces the worst part of, I think, the grading system and the assessment system, and it doesn't do anything to change it. It's purely a digital facelift.
It is.
Well,
It's a cosmetic facelift.
what do you say to? All right, so Noise Professor says, as an alternative accreditation, yes, they're useless. But what about as a micromechanic at the course or program level?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, as a fun
Sure.
game aspect of a course or a program.
But
or
that's not what
experience,
this
but
is.
That's not what this is. And
No.
and to his
Well,
comment,
let's be clear though. This is a framework for creating badges. What people do with them and how people use them are completely up to the
absolutely.
institution.
But if you read this white paper, the examples they're giving are not examples about doing this on a fun level at the course level as a way to build
Yeah.
social networking, as a way to build a community.
Right.
On
And
Duncan didn't come out.
Hold on a second. I want to respond to Noise Professor. He says, do y'all use Foursquare? People love to try and outmayor each other. And I'm not debating that. My point is that they want to do that as part of the game, as part of as part of the gaming factor and aspect of that community. It's not so that they can put it on their resume.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Arn Duncan wouldn't be there talking about, like, hey, I got this new idea. It's called, you know, stickers for your students. They did good work. Put a sticker on their work, which is just the same thing as this is using a system, a framework by which people can credential in different ways across the web. So it actually breaks out of institutions, but I don't think it speaks directly to one class. Like, okay, yeah, because I think using icons and fun stuff for that for a class is, you know, the idea of that particular culture, like you said, on a micro level. But we're not talking is not micro. This is a macro attempt to approach systematically a new way of assessment, which it's not.
And he is making the point that we are, and I think we are on the same side, and that ultimately how it's used doesn't necessarily have to be in line with the white paper. And I agree with that. And in that sense, this as a framework for experimenting with badges in any context is sort of interesting.
Yeah.
What I have a problem with is the rhetoric around this, and the imagined use cases that have obviously driven this project.
Well, I love Martin Weller, and he says something that I was kind of struck by on Twitter. He said, if we can crack this nut, I think it has unbelievable potential for education. What I don't understand is, where is the nut? Like, what is there to crack about badges? Like, I just think they're like it's just basically taking one idea like grading and turning it into a visual design representation.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the nut. There's no nut to crack.
Yeah.
But do people, the thing I wonder about though, do people strive for an A or a B or a C or whatever in the same way? Well, for one,
Would it be different if they got a
grading
badge?
is just a 1 through 5 scale in terms of a letter grade, whereas badges open it up completely, I guess, in some ways. So there's that aspect of it, and there's also Foursquare really is a good example of people really jumping up and saying, I want those badges. I don't get into the Foursquare thing, so I can't speak to why that is, but there's a social aspect there that doesn't exist in a letter grade or a percentage grade. So,
Yeah.
you know.
And I mean, that's the interesting part, and I think Noise Professor speaking, about this to some degree, is how do we think about the badge as an objectification of that social community you want, And if it's doing that to further that community, that's fine. But these badges are going to be hung on a wall like a degree, right? Like there is this notion of the badge is kind of trying to crack the nut, I think, of open accreditation, which is the nut.
Well,
the badge is not the nut.
And it's
the idea of accreditation and some sort of trust network is the nut.
Yeah.
Is badge going to do it? I don't know. I don't think so.
And the one interesting point to the framework, which I did not realize, this Noise Professor is saying that there's going to be a Reddit-style upvoting from your peers. It's a peer-based system where they can, put validation behind a certain person's credentials, their badges, whatever the hell you want to call them.
But then, what we are talking about is there's all sorts of different ways to game that, just like Google.
Exactly.
I mean, look, that's flawed. Just like, yes, Julia, it is a certificate. It is a badge. That's what a diploma is. And we here at DTLT have been understanding the limits of that kind of objectified notion of certification and related specifically to a degree. I mean, let's talk about diversity of thought rather than diversity, which is a very minor diversity of how you're going to grade with a letter or with an icon. Let's think of really radically different ways to understand how we accredit different expertise, right? And how we as institutions and communities begin to value that different expertise. I mean, it's a very different question. I mean, I love it. Arne Duncan's behind it. What does that tell you? I mean, at least behind the kind of the rollout right now. I don't know.
And maybe it's the rollout and the language of the rollout and the rhetoric of the rollout that bothers me more than anything, because badges as a concept is something that we've been interested in before. We've talked about it as sort of like a grassroots type of thing in DS-106 and having students, create and award badges as a form of gameplay within the class.
Absolutely.
That I don't have a problem with. What I have a problem with is this rhetoric. It is so difficult. Yeah. And even like reading the white paper, one of the things they talk about is that the badges will allow them to sort of award people along a progression. You'll get like interim badges as you progress through a course of, maybe a course of study, but through, whatever goal it is you're trying to get to. And in a way that's like, it's like getting at the sense that like learning is some prescriptive path, that like, that there's always a prescriptive path and that's what our job as educators is to walk people through that and pick up the badge and move on to the next thing. Yeah. And it's like I just think there's so much more to it than that.
And there's been a lot of people on there, and there's this real heavy reaction to the gamification of education right now, and I don't know what that means in that term, and I've kind of stayed away from it because I don't really know, where that idea of game begins and ends. But I mean, a lot of people are reacting to the badge notion as you're just further gamifying this whole approach. Right. And I do think that the idea of games and education is fun. We've kind of played with that idea, especially in an immersion org or something like that. But I think education at its best is devastating.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's like, oh, yes, you know, I've learned.
Right.
You know, like, I don't know. I mean, how do we, you know, or like Gardner said, the analytics of love, that
Right.
famous noise professor.
Well,
it's like,
devastating can be
yeah, it's like, how do you get at that with
devastating.
this?
Yeah.
You know, it seems like yet another, I don't know, it just seems like more wallpaper.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, right, there could be really good uses for it in applications, and there are some really smart people who are excited about it, which makes me want to rethink it. I always do when people are excited about it, I respect. But at the same time, I feel like, you know, it's that initial excitement and that initial, like, everything's overdrawn,
Right.
that you start to feel drained. And we as a group particularly feel drained these
It's been
days.
a draining day.
So, I mean, like, when we hear about this, we're like, really? Like,
It's
what
not all cuddle couch around
exactly,
here, okay?
it's not. And then, like, it's like, what does this do to help solve our social, what do they call it? Not social welfare, they call it social entitlement programs.
Yeah.
Like, what does this do to, you know, deal with our economy? Like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? It's a goddamn distraction.
Jeez.
You really had nothing to say about this topic.
It just drives me crazy. I didn't want to even go here.
We could be talking about teddy bears, and this would go the same direction. Let's be clear about this. No, I think, here's my thing about it. Badges as a name, as a concept, it's goofy. And I think that's part... It's not a criticism of what Mozilla has created. It's a criticism of, like, I think that's everybody's gut reaction when anybody comes to you and says, badges have a potential in the education institution.
Right. I mean, that's
It's just like,
it.
immediately I'm
It's
going to
like
come to you and say...
chicken nuggets are
Yeah.
I'm going to faculty tomorrow.
And it's like, maybe you figured something out. So
Are you on the Badgosphere? It's hot.
And
Are you blogging the
as people who
Badgosphere?
like work professionally with faculty to try and get them to think about, you know, innovating in the classroom, if I walked into a meeting with a faculty member tomorrow and said, I have got the answer for you, it is badges.
Listen,
Honey
you're all
badgers.
here. You all get badges.
No.
I mean,
Okay.
come on.
Here would be my request to these people, because we're running out of time. But I would end this by saying this will be up on dtlttoday.com, and I would like people to comment there specifically about the useful portions of this, and maybe we can have
Let's
another
have a
episode
useful- right.
Yeah.
talking
or-
about the
And I'm
framework
happy-
itself.
I
and-
have a better
And I'm happy
idea.
to explore this framework and start seeing
Yeah.
if we can't do something.
And I even have a
but-
better idea than both that. I wish
Look at
someone...
that far.
I think we should go have people not comment, but go to the Noun Project, get a little icon badge, and get the badge that they think represents
Can you-
this episode for them.
Can you badge
It could be
your
a
opinion?
campfire. It could be a commie sickle. It could be whatever you want, but it's somehow kind of a badge that suggests that you've watched.
Look, Noise
And then you'll be accredited having watched.
Look, Noise
Because you don't want to
Professor
do it
says
for
he's
any other reason.
Noise Professor says he is going to walk in tomorrow to fellow faculty and talk about badges.
Yeah, because
If he's-
look, the guy grows things in his garden,
Yes.
you know? I mean,
Yeah.
he's like that.
He's a lot more hardcore than we are.
Yeah.
but we gotta
He's
end it
actually,
now.
you know, he's real.
So, all right, that's all I got. Honey badgers.
For life.
life.
Badges for life.
All right, see y'all later.
Thank you.